welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hello, parents, and happy Pride Month. It is June, and because of that, I'm really excited to be coming to you this week with a special episode in honor of Pride. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. I am so saddened to see all the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, media, and legislation that has been happening across our country of late, and frankly, across the world. As a person who has LGBTQ folks in my life who are near and dear and precious to me, it just makes me incredibly, incredibly sad. And so this is, with my good friend, Amy Lang, our little offering out to the world to try to make some things right and give people tools and, educate, support, etc., for those incredibly loved and valued LGBTQ members of our community, our families, our lives. And I can't think of a better guest to have here to be celebrating Pride Month with me than Amy Lang. She is a dear friend of mine. She is a treasured colleague of mine, and she is doing really incredible work over at birdsandbeesandkids.com. She is an early mentor of mine in the parenting space and in the business space, and I'm just so grateful for her partnership. You can also find her at bbkpros.com. But if you don't know Amy, if you've never heard her, taken a class from her, listened to her podcast, you are in for a treat. She's fun. She's snarky. She's irreverent. She's also been a sexual health educator for over 25 years. She's got a lively, engaging, and really down-to-earth style. And with that, she helps parents become more comfortable and confident in talking with their kids about sex, love, relationships, all of that stuff. Her books that she's written, one of which I got to help contribute to and edit, her online solutions center, and her podcast show parents that they really can become their kids' go-to birds and bees source. Amy says she's still married to her first husband, and they are getting the hang of parenting their recently launched man-child. She lives in Seattle, Washington, very close to me. And you can, as I said, learn more about her work on her website and on social media. She's on all the socials. Amy and I today are really digging into this idea of how can we support unequivocally our LGBTQ youth? Why is this such an important piece of safety and safe parenting, which, if you know me, is really important to me? And, what are the conversations that we need to be having with our kids, whether they identify as LGBTQ or not? This is an important conversation. I hope you will stick around. I hope you will keep an open mind if this is a tough subject for you. And I hope you'll celebrate with me if it's not a tough subject. I hope that you'll step into the idea with me this month that there is a whole significant segment of the population that deserves not just support, but celebration. Happy Pride, everyone. Amy Lang, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Of course, I'm so happy to support you and always talk to you. And this is juicy.
It is juicy. So it's June. We're recording this in June. It's airing in June. And June is what?
Pride Month. Woohoo!
Woo! Pride Month. Yeah. So, I have to imagine most listeners know what Pride Month is, but just in case, tell us what it is.
Gay Pride Month is a celebration of folks who are LGBTQ plus It is the month where we pay attention, think about, support, educate about the lovely humans on our planet. I think the percentage is like admitted is like 12%. But if we look at the full gamut of LGBTQ plus folks and who identify in that way, it's got to be more like 20%, if not higher.
Yeah.
So that's what Gay Pride Month is all about. And you and I have some terrible, hilarious things to talk about that we just discovered about each other.
We do. So, well, as you know, I have been a longtime supporter of the LGBTQ community. I have a kiddo who identifies on the LGBTQ spectrum, and like this matters deeply to me. So, because this is going to roll right into what your story is. So as many of my listeners know, I hosted the Safe Parenting Summit, first annual Safe Parenting Summit in February of this year, 2023, hosting it again in March of 2024. And in that summit, because it was based on safe parenting and how we build a safer world for our kids, I had a speaker who was talking about supporting our LGBTQ kids. I had several speakers who themselves were LGBTQ. And at the end of the summit, when I invited attendees to give feedback, like what did they like, what did they not like, one, I will call them a registrant because they were clearly not a participant, had waited around till the end of the summit just to give me the feedback that I was a terrible human being and that I should be ashamed of myself because I was I should not have any LGBTQ speakers. We should not talk about this subject because I was doing the exact opposite of keeping kids safe. I was filling their brains with terrible things. I have to admit that my first reaction was, woohoo, I pissed off the right people.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this feeling.
Yeah, because I know, and and we can talk a little bit about this today, like, suicide rates are higher among those LGBTQ kids who do not have a supportive adult in their wheelhouse. And so if we want to just basic safety, which means let's keep kids alive.
At the very least.
If that is the bar that we're trying to leap over, which is keeping kids alive and not suicidal, then talking about this, supporting this, is the number one thing that we can do. It is the very definition of safe parenting.
Yes, of course. And it cracks me up that she's like, and you're making kids unsafe. Like you're grooming. As like, did they pull the grooming thing? Like sometimes folks say that people like us are helping.
In this particular one, she didn't use the word grooming, but because I'm talking to parents and not kids, but it certainly had that like tone and tenor to it.
Yep.
So the reason we're talking about my story from February is because you just got a lovely piece of hate mail today.
I did. So I just did a class about talking to queer kids about sex. And I sent out the first email a couple days ago. And let me just read to you what I got back.
Yeah.
This person, now, mind you, they have signed up for my newsletter on purpose, but this is what they said. And, frankly, this is what we are up against. They said, remove me immediately from this filth and do not ever send me this disgusting information ever again. This is absolutely unacceptable and do not send me any more of this trash. Wow. And I've been at this long enough to know not to bite.
Yeah.
But same with you. I was like, oh, man. And I don't respond. I don't be like, whatever, that's her problem. And, I just think this illustrates what we're up against, that people think this way. And that person probably has children. And oh my God, the horror for her children who know that they are like this. And the chance of them being queer is high. 24% of kids identify as something other than straight. That's from the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey from 2022. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
It breaks my heart too. And, we can laugh about it. Now we're getting hate mail and hate messages. And that's, because you and I both have pretty thick skins and we believe passionately in the work that we do. So it's like, yeah, we know there are going to be some people, but But what you just touched on is that there's this bigger issue that is really not funny. And that is that there are kids out there, whether it's these people's specific children or other kids, who are living in a world where it's not okay to be who they are. And that we know, as I said at the beginning, like we know suicide rates are higher, mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, the whole gamut. And, I had this experience last summer, actually, where there was a parent who was sort of expressing that they were unhappy or not supportive of the, kiddos who are LGBTQ. And I wanted to say to this parent, and I wasn't engaging with her, so I didn't have the opportunity to say this, but I wanted to say, like, what would you have parents do? Would you like them to simply disown their children and kick them out of the house? Is that the message?
Right. Right. Is that, I mean, that is not the message, but that's one way to sort of help these folks maybe come around. And so saying, like you said, well, here's the deal. The suicide rate is 4 times higher than the general population. And the number one thing that keeps them on par with the general population is parental caregiver support.
Right.
And I think if you say, kids kill themselves because they don't have, like, the chance of that is greatly increased. And like you said, what are you going to do with this?
Right.
Right. What are you going to do with this? So, I think that just for us as advocates and your darling listeners as advocates for queer kids, and even if you're not, like, I know this is rough stuff for lots of people. And I just want to make a little note that I'm saying queer instead of LGBTQ plus, because that's too many letters. And I got permission from somebody in the community to say that.
Yeah.
As advocates for, queer kids and families and human beings, I think it's really important that we all and you all learn about their sexuality and how to talk about it and what to do with it, especially if you're skeptical or come from a background where this is like these people, we'll just call them assholes, that emailed and communicated with us. Like, if you come from that background, this is really complicated and difficult. But if you're open and you want your kid to be healthy and safe, which is, of course, our only job, then I've got some ideas and things you can do to help with that. And even if you know your kid's not queer, they're friends, right? Your family members, you might have nieces or nephews that need you. And if you show up in a way that the way you talk, the things you do, they see that, they're going to come to you, and they might come to you before they come to their parents. Oftentimes kids will test the waters, as I know, with somebody, a trustworthy adult, to see how they react before they come to their parents. So. Yeah.
Well, I think actually let's start at the beginning, because even those of us who are allies, like those people, those parents listening who are like, I get you and I'm on board or I'm open to learning. Let's start with some definitions. So sexuality and gender are different.
Right.
Sexual orientation and gender are different.
Right.
Can you parse that out for us a little bit and share some dictionary definitions?
Yes, I can. So I'm going to be a little boring and dictionary-y, but it's important. So I'm a firm believer in 101, right? Like, I am a firm believer in hearing it all again, or because you'll hear it in a different way. So this is not perfect, and things are changing so quickly that I might say things that are now not in the scene anymore. But so the first thing we have to talk about is biology, biological sex. So when I think about biology, it's whether you have female or male reproductive organs, whether you have a penis, a uterus, testicles, ovaries. So that's biological. So there are 3 biological sexes: male, female, and intersex. Intersex used to be called hermaphrodite, and we don't say that anymore. So intersex is a person that is born with chromosomes, maybe genitalia. Their secondary sex characteristics are different than a typical male or female body. So, for example, a person may be born and they have a vulva, but that's what you can see, but they also might have a sort of extended, larger clitoris. So that person might be intersex. And so our gender is determined based on our parts. So gender is basically, we hear gender identity all the time, right? So that's how you feel. Like, do you feel like a guy or a gal or a mix or neither? So most people, when their gender is given at birth, they identify with that gender. Like, I'm not going to prove it because we're not on camera, but I have female reproductive organs. I got a vulva and the whole 9 yards. And my gender when I was born was given to me was girl. I totally feel like a girl. I like things that girls do. I don't feel like a guy at all much.
Right.
So it's how you feel on the inside. Sometimes it's matchy with the typical body part. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
So expression is how you show up in the world. Clothes, haircut, mannerism, voice, body. And then there's one more piece of gender. It's presentation, which is actually how the world sees you. How the world sees you and makes decisions about your gender, which is usually based on your expression. So that's gender. We could talk about this for 4,000 years.
Yes.
Because
yes,
we could. And I think the reason people struggle with gender identity is that because they're like me, they feel like a girl, they feel like a guy, they feel like a man, they feel like a woman. They fully identify with this. So the idea of not being able to identify with the gender you were given is really foreign.
Yeah.
Really foreign.
I don't know if you've had this experience, but I think in speaking with people and even in my own evolution through this, I have found the different sexualities easier to wrap my head around than the not feeling matchy, as you said, with your gender, with the gender that you were given.
Yeah. I
think
think
sex parts.
Yeah. I think that's because we see gender, right? It's visual. And like you're running around with your sexual orientation. You can't see that I'm mostly straight. Right? You can assume that about me. And sure, sometimes you can look at someone and know that they are gay. Like Carrie's cousin Damon, he came out the womb gay. And everybody knew, and he came out to us, we're like, So that's not necessarily typical, but I don't know if that's a good story, but just as an example, but you really usually cannot tell. With gender, we make decisions all the time, right? And what's one of the very first things we do when we look at someone, the very first thing we do is we look at their skin color and we look at their gender, and we kind of do that all at once. Right. All at once. So that's why it's harder to wrap your mind around, right? Yeah. A signal, right? It's a signal to the world about who you are. So these days you could be looking any number of ways, and people's gender is what it is, right? It's kind of all over the map and that kind of thing. I think that's a really great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, but yeah, that's what it is. You can see it.
So, okay. So we've got gender, and then we've got sexual orientation, which we've touched on. Yeah. Mentioned gay and straight, but that's not all there is.
No. Right. So sexual orientation is kind of two things. It's one is like who you want to bonk, right? Who do you want to be sexually physical with? Who do you want to make out with? Who do you want to, do it with?
Right.
There's also romantic and emotional attraction, which is, like you're attracted to their personality, who they are, that how they show up in the world, and you have romantic feelings or a strong emotional tie to the person. So these two things with orientation. And in the show notes, there's something called the gender unicorn, which is a lovely, 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 lovely way to look at gender and sexual orientation, this sort of new lens. And rather than either or, gay or straight, now we're looking at more or less. Like, do you feel more straight or more gay? How much straight do you feel? How much gay do you feel? That kind of thing. So it's one of my very favorite tools.
I love that. And I love that we're going to share that with listeners. So it's super helpful. Okay. So let's talk about sexual attraction / orientation terms. So I say attraction because orientation, I'm like, which way are you pointing? Right. It just seems so weird to me. But anyway, there's several of them. So obviously gay or straight, right? So we know what those are. Someone who's bisexual is attracted to men or women, men and women, sort of both genders. Some air quoting, you can't see me, but people, I should say this, people identify how they identify. People have different definitions of this, what it means to them. So I'm going to give you kind of the traditional, and then
when I said this is all going to be maybe out the window. This might be one of the areas where it's all out the window.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So if somebody's bisexual, they tend to be attracted to, one gender or the other. Someone who is asexual or ace, we're hearing lots and lots of kids these days are ace or asexual, which means they're not attracted to anybody physically at all. Mm-hmm. Now there might be some romantic, they might do some romance, but they don't have any sense of physical attraction. Sort of along with that, there's people who are aromantic, which they have little or no romantic attraction. So they might be happy to have sex with somebody, but they don't do romance. Like they don't have those feelings. And those folks are arrow.
Okay. Yeah. Arrow. Yep.
Arrow. Okay. So the next step, we have pansexual. Someone who's pansexual, they don't care. Guy, gal, trans, androgynous, intersex, they don't care. They just are attracted to the person and they don't have any, it's no preference per se. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
And then another thing you probably heard is demisexual. So that's someone, there's sexual attraction, but it usually that happens after they've formed that emotional romantic attachment. So the sexual part happens after they've sort of like fall in love, and then you have sexual attraction would be an example.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any others you've heard of that you want me to?
I think you've covered the ones that I've heard of, at least off the top of my head. And I think your sort of caveat is appropriate that some of these definitions will mean different things for different people and that it is changing. Mm-hmm. I am curious a little bit about so you talked about we're seeing an increase in kids with the asexual or the ace sort of orientation. I'm wondering if you have any idea or what you would attribute that to. Like, is this kids that have not gone through puberty yet and therefore or is it the hypersexualization, the pornography that they're being exposed to? Like, where do you think that increase is coming from?
So not scientific research based on Amy's just opinion. I think part of it is that it is, especially for girls, it is so much safer to identify as asexual or ace because of what you just said. There's so much pressure. There's so much sexualization. And so being ace gets them off the hook is a theory.
Yeah.
Is a theory. Same with being aromantic. Like, I just don't do this. And so I feel like it might be protective for some people. For some people, they just don't do sex. They're just not into it. And that's, of course, a completely normal way of being. And your kids should know that. Like, when you're talking about these things with them, the main deal here should be that, like, some people are like this, some people are not like that. It's all good, right?
Yeah.
You are who you are. I mean, it is a safety issue, right? They don't have to have that on the table. Now, the place that gets a little complicated is that sometimes someone will discover that they actually do have sexual feelings and they do start having a relationship with someone and they might not be using the birth control, which I'm super fan of, right? So just one thing about all of this, it doesn't matter how your child identifies. You have to talk with them about consent, condoms, and birth control.
Right.
Because most queer kids have penis and vagina sex at some point.
Right.
So they got to be protected.
I just want to go back for a minute because you were saying like that it's a safety thing for these kids. And as you were saying that just really resonated with me because as you and I have talked about, and this is a totally different topic for a totally different podcast episode, but the things that our kids are being exposed to sexually in terms of as we said, hypersexualization, increasingly like misogynistic and violent pornography, that's really, let's just be honest, not really great for anybody, certainly not meant for kids. And when we couple that with the fact that we are still in many ways stuck back in the 1950s as parents where we don't talk to our kids, gay or straight, queer or straight, right, about sex. There was a really interesting study that came out of Harvard, part of the Making Caring Common project and I don't have the study in front of me. So, please forgive me, anyone, if I get the exact statistics wrong, but it was something like overwhelming majority, like 85% of teenagers and young adults prefer to be in a sort of lasting, committed relationship. And roughly the same percentage of them said that they only ever got talked to about sex, relationships, etc., once, if at all. And so we have this perfect pressure cooker of kids that are being exposed to terrible content, are, don't know how to, have not ever had these conversations, and yet want healthy relationships. And so we've just created this terrible situation. And that's true, again, whether it's like we're talking about a kid on the LGBTQ range of things or straight, like I said, totally separate note, but we got to be talking to our kids. So how do we, for those parents who have queer kids or queer kids in their life, want to be supportive? Two questions. One, how can we support them? And then two, which you can answer these in either order. How do we actually talk to them about sex, especially when it might be sex that we're not real familiar with?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. So let's do the support one first, and then we'll talk about sex. So the first thing is, if a child ever comes out to you in any way, believe them, because this is such a fundamental part of who we are. It is so important that you believe them, you take them at face value, and you listen to them. And even if you're like, oh God, phase, what the hell is this? You're skeptical. Those words cannot come out of your mouth. See our suicide rate. So that's the first thing. Ask questions like, tell me what this means to you. Who else have you told? What can I do? What do you need from me? So ask those kinds of questions. Ask them, like if there's another parent in their life, like they've come out to you, do you say, have you come out, where are you in this? Who else do you need to come out to? Do you want to come out to? How can I support you in that? Also, just talking with them, just sort of generally before anybody comes out, about like how you're sex positive and how you're down with all the sexualities and genders, and, watch shows. Like I think Heartstopper is one that's really sweet about
it's so
guys, you two guys. Yeah. These two boys, really. So talk about it in a positive way. Like when you have two dad family, two mom family, like queer, people in your life, be positive about them. The other reason to do that, especially with family members and folks who are in your life that are queer, that's a place where your kid can go, right? That's a place where your kid can go. Oh, the other thing too is to make sure that you're really clear that you'll keep their confidence and that you're not going to go blah, 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 blah to everybody. And then another good question to ask too, just in general, when you're talking with them, is like, who do you know that's queer? Who do you know that's, not straight or change their gender or anything like that? Because you're doing some data gather. And if you're asking those questions, it's going to also open the door for them to talk to you. You can also say, I'm sort of all over the map with this. You can also say, I'm just curious how you're feeling about your gender and your sexual orientation. Now, as you know, with adolescents, they may say, fine.
Right. One word answer. I'm not talking about this with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing too would be to have books for kids that are about, sex education books for kids that are very open and accepting. So there's two fairly new ones. One's called Sex, that's graphic novel style. It is super inclusive. It's really good. It's really big, but it's got everything in it. And then the other one is the Everybody book. And that's specifically for LGBTQ kids. And so having those available and around, along with whatever else you got going. So those are things you can do that will say to them, I'm here for you, because at the end of the day, it's about their health and safety. So the other side of this is that you might be completely flummoxed. You might be really upset. You might be really worried. You cannot do any of that with your child. You do your freak out on your own time. You can talk to me. There's PFLAG. There's so many supportive organizations now that you can take care of yourself separately from your child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, isn't that kind of a really good piece of advice for any part of parenting?
Yeah. Do you freak out on your own time? I know.
Yeah,
That's like, I have 3 parenting tips. Do you freak out on your own time? Right? Poker face. Do you freak out on your own time? And then my other 2, special time. And what's the other one? There's another one. But
yeah. No, totally. Like we have to manage our own shit, right? On our own time. Again, whether it's about them not getting an A in a class or whether it's about them announcing to you that they are transgender, which those are 2 totally different subjects and different health and safety implications. But parents freak out about them both, right?
Yep, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
We gotta manage our own stuff on our own time. Okay, so then you mentioned having some books that can be really helpful and supportive. And, I am a huge fan of books. I think they make it so, especially like with young children, they make it so easy to have these conversations that parents otherwise don't know how to have.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't have to say anything. I just have to read a book. I can do that.
Yeah.
But as our kids grow and are hitting those, tween and teen years, when we may start to see more of this sort of exploration of identity, how do we talk to them? Especially if we are straight and they are not.
Yeah, that's such a good question. You just said something that I need to tag on, which is you said the word exploring. Thank you. It is an exploration of who they are as a human being. It's not experimenting. Do not say experimenting. It's exploring. This is a natural extension of adolescence and trying to figure out who am I? And now we just have this bonus where they can explore their sexuality, right? This hasn't happened before. This is new. This is new. Okay. Sorry. Had to say that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you pointed that out. And I'm glad I used the right word, which I always use. That is the word I always use, but yes.
Right. Of course you do. Of course you do. So exploring, not experimenting. Okay. So this sex talk thing. So sex is sex, right? Sex is sex. It doesn't matter who you're bonking. We all do the same stuff. I mean, if there's not a penis involved, then there's not going to be any anal sex or any blowjobs, but we all do the same stuff. Like you need to go into the conversation. Like it's sex. We do it for pleasure, right? People who are having sex with someone who's the same sex as them, they're just doing it for pleasure, right?
Right.
There ain't no baby making going to happen without a whole lot of work, So I think that we kind of get hung up in our own sexuality. Like you said, like, okay, I'm a straight parent and I've got a kid that's queer. How am I going to talk to them about this? Right. So we're all sexual beings. It just looks, a little bit different when it comes to the nuts and bolts of things with people who are not straight or gay. So a couple things just need to be really clear that not everybody has sex. Some people do, some people don't. There's all kinds of different things people can do that are considered sexual, everything from hand holding and massages to kissing to, all the other kinds of sex, right? So it's not just parts and wholes, which is what porn has given children, unfortunately.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing too, just in general, is talking about how friendship is so important in a romance. And so oftentimes kids will start there, straight or otherwise. They'll start with the sort of romance, right, piece of it before they get to the sex part. And in fact, most adolescent relationships operate that way. Of course, there is just the hooking up. So a couple things, you do not have to be the Wikipedia of sex. You don't have to tell them how to do it. You just need to tell them what it is. And then, again, you really need to be like, hey, when queer folks have sex, if there's not a possibility of pregnancy, you're doing it for fun. Everybody's doing it for fun. And so again, like the cool thing about this is you're not at risk for any kind of pregnancy if you're having matching parts. But this idea that pleasure is the central point of this, like it's what people do, that's why people do it. You do need to talk about like anal, oral sex, mutual masturbation. Just if you're trying, like if your kid's like, what do I do with anybody? Everybody does that, except for no penis, right? No anal, no penis, no anal. But even then, people do have anal sex using toys. Now, I would not go that route with my kid because it's, for me, that might be too much information, but that's definitely something you could say when you're talking about sex for pleasure. I would say that's about the third conversation down the road.
And that's like we're not
older.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. For 5-year-olds, right?
Not for five, please, not for 5-year-olds. Like, this is really for 10, 11, 12, like let's get there with this. And definitely teenagers talking about this stuff. Always, always, always consent. Consent means 2 yeses. And then
and can I just add to that?
Yeah.
It doesn't just mean 2 yeses. I think it means 2 enthusiastic yeses.
Yes.
Yep.
Clear,
I know you're with me on that. Yep.
Clear, enthusiastic yeses. And that also with the consent piece requires some maturity and some empathy, right? Which it does not kick in for way too long. Right. Do you remember what's the age when people are actually capable of being empathetic? Is it like 10?
At least. It might even be, it takes a while for empathy to kick in.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't have fully developed brains until about age 25. So, couple that in there.
Yeah, for sure. So if your kiddo is gay, a gay boy with a penis, absolutely talking about condoms and HIV and STIs. They really need to know that HIV is still a risk and that they're at increased risk because of the type of sex. So really making sure that they understand that condoms need to be used, making them available to your child. Doesn't matter who they're hooking up with. Your children will never hook up, by the way. They'll just have long-term meaningful relationships.
Right.
Sorry. And then, like I said, the birth control information. Everybody needs information about birth control because it's part of their health, right? And so even if your child, like I said, is asexual, even if they're a lesbian, it doesn't matter. They still need to know because shit happens, right? And people change. And, so being ready for all of it. So, honestly, this talking to your queer kids about sex, it's the same as talking to everybody else. But there are a couple things that are different, right? Which would be how the world perceives them. Mm-hmm. They could get teased. They could be assaulted. They have a higher risk of that kind of stuff because of their sexual orientation. So that could come into play. But frankly, that could happen to anyone. But any kid who's queer, they have higher risks all around.
Right.
So just being, hey, you need to be careful about who you're hanging out with, and maybe, especially when they're young, who you come out to, because you can't always tell if someone's going to be cool or not. And if they are having sex and they are partnered with somebody, just to, be really clear about this is shitty, but depending on where they live in the world, it might not be safe for them to even hold hands in public. Right. So, let alone talk about the stuff they're getting up to. So kind of just circling back to this, it's safer for them to have all this information. It's safer for you to be making the effort and just saying I'm not like you in this department, but I really want you to be safe and have all this information. So here I go. You will find that things are going to be different for you. But when you make that effort, you're showing up as a safe adult for your child, and they need you.
You know what, in that sort of whole discussion of how we talk about this, 2 things I appreciate the most. One is pretty much the same. A couple little differences, pretty much the same. So, we don't have to freak out, and parents freak out about talking about this anyway, but we don't have to freak out extra. 2, you touched on something way back at the beginning of that, which was that we also need to talk to them about relationship in this. And I think that gets glossed over a lot when we get in our heads about the how-to, the mechanics of it, that we forget our kids also need information about how to be in relationship with another person. Again, gay, straight, or otherwise, they are thirsty for that information.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And so talking about what's a healthy relationship, what does that look like? Making sure they understand that somebody texting them 47,000 times a day is a no-go. Talking to them about if you can't say to your partner, I have my period, then maybe you shouldn't be, maybe you should think about what you're doing with them physically. And again, with kids who are LGBTQ, their relationships are different. They're just different, right? The world perceives them differently. They have, they may have started out as really good friends, and then the relationship has become romantic, which happens all the time with straight kids. But there's more at stake.
Yeah.
There's just more at stake.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what gets in the way for a lot of parents, because it's scary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We worry for them. We know that life, and this is shitty, but life is easier if you are straight. That's right. If our gender identity is matchy with your sexual cards.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easier. It's just easier and it's safer. So that's, so this is another reason why it's so important to be open and talking about this, because if something goes sideways, they need to really be able to tell you that they need help. Yeah. And, all kids are at risk for being manipulated. And, I think the other thing too about all this is our perception of their relationships, right? So somebody just asked me, their daughter is gay, and they're like, what do we do with the sleepover?
Yeah.
Right. If it was a regular girl.
I'm curious how you answered that.
Well, I think that, for me, it's like, fine, nobody's going to get knocked up. Right. But I believe that for Milo, right. We were, not casual hooking up for sure. But his girlfriend, when they started dating, like, yes, you may do what you want here. My spouse is very funny. And he says, we don't want to hear it, see it, or smell it, which is a great rule, right? So if somebody's 16, 17 and they're in a relationship, I'm for having sex at home, but not everybody is. So even if it's the same gender, or whatever, you have to decide in your family. But just think about where you had sex when you were not a child, and hopefully, teenager. A young person. And then imagine there's double risk because you're the same gender or sex, right? Or there's something else. There's something that's not just penis and vagina-y and cisgender, right? So, yeah, it's up to the family. I was like, for me, it's fine, but it's not for everyone. And if it's not okay, then you need to be, it's just easier, but it's just me. I'm like, I'm the easy way out parent. But yeah, so you have to figure out what that's going to look like in your family before you get there. But I'll tell you this, you might be right now, you got a 10-year-old and you're like, oh, hell no sleepovers. And then when your kid in 6 years or 7 years has a girlfriend or boyfriend or partner, and you might change your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true about a lot of parenting. Things we think we will do or won't do, we change our minds about, as our perspective shifts, as the world shifts, as all sorts of, and then we go, oh, this is what it's like to have a teenager. Yeah. And the other thing I love, and you didn't say this outright today, but I've heard you say it before. You kind of did, is this is a lovely place where families get to bring their own values to bear about whether or not that's the right fit for them. Great. But we can still help our children, as we, in this Pride Month, and as we come to sort of a close here, as we think about how we can best celebrate Pride Month. I keep going back to the comments that you and I both know, and that you said, like, it's not as safe. Like our LGBTQ kids are not as safe. And this is our chance as parents, whether we have a kid who identifies in that way or is exploring that or not, we get the opportunity to create a safer world, which is what my summit was about. It's what a lot of the work you and I both do is about, is how do we make the world safer for all of our kids? And that's at the end what Pride Month is really about, right?
Yeah, it really is. I think a couple of things that people can do that might feel hard, but are worth it in the long run is just, and I like baby homework, right? So just turning up your radar to when you hear something that is homophobic or anti-LGBTQ, and then taking a minute and thinking about, what can I do in this circumstance? So right now in our universe, there's a lot of bad news. It's just really bad, right, for queer folks. And so if you have a family member that says something and you can safely say, you know what, that's hate speech. Like, I don't want to hear it from you. And if they're like, oh, you're woke and all that BS, then just say, yeah, maybe I am. But for me, it's not my business. It's not my business. And it's all about respect. Like finding a little thing you can say. I would say do that. I would also say find some books, right? right now is the time, right? There are so many books for kids, for teenagers that have themes around these issues. And then, change your Facebook thingy. You got a little rainbow thing. You and I have it both going on, right? Go to Birds, Bees, Kids on Facebook and you can see there are these cute little rainbow things. Just doing that.
Yeah.
It's tiny, right? It's tiny, but, hopefully it'll help. And then, vote.
Yes.
Vote.
For so many reasons. Please do that. Amy, thank you so much for this wisdom and sort of, keeping it real and talking about how we can support our kids unequivocally. We do that without thought if they are straight and cisgender, and we should also do that without thought if they are not straight and not cisgender. You've got a podcast. Tell us about it.
I do.
Where people can find you.
I do. So my podcast is called Just Say This, and it's advice column style. So people call in or email me with their questions, and then I answer them on the show. It is potluck. So I could have somebody calling about their 5-year-old who can't keep his hand, keeps his hand down his pants 24/7, to a 15-year-old who stole their mother's underpants, and now there's stuff going on around that. So episodes on porn, all kinds of stuff. So it's, I'm very unfiltered.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, you don't often have guests on because it is advice style, but I did get to be on it, which was super fun a while back. So find Amy's podcast. It's great. It's helpful. It gives you language to use when you don't know what to say.
Yes, for sure. And I have special guest stars like you who are within the realm of my field. Right. But of course everybody knows you were great. Everybody knows you were great. Yeah. So anyway, thank you. I'm glad we talked about this. I think that it's important. And so one other thing you can do is share this episode.
Yes.
Listener, just share the episode. We took care of some business.
We did. Yeah. So thank you for talking about it as well. And happy Pride.
Thanks. Happy Pride to you too.
Thanks. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that the conversation that I had today with Amy was educational, insightful, helpful, confirming, supportive, et cetera, and that if this is a difficult subject for you or something that you struggle with, maybe you learned something that you didn't know before, or it opened your mind just a bit. Our LGBTQ kids deserve support. They deserve love. It is a critical piece of safe parenting. Please reach out if you have any questions. And don't forget, I support parents in all sorts of ways: private coaching, speaking engagements, and the Heartful Parent Academy, which just launched all new core content. There are 13 incredible modules in there that will support you as a parent. I just want to share with you a recent review that was sent to me by one of our members, because I think this is pretty cool. She said, "The Heartful Parent Academy is like nothing else I've ever seen. I've been a part of multiple peaceful and positive parenting memberships and communities the last few years, and none of those have come close to what the Heartful Parent Academy offers. Christy has used her tremendous knowledge and expertise to build a collective that covers every essential aspect in not only learning how to implement positive parenting in your home, but also focusing on how important it is to build a solid foundation by identifying your values, getting real with your current family life, setting goals for where you envision going, understanding your own triggers, understanding how you were parented has a direct correlation on how you parent, etc. Positive parenting techniques are very difficult to implement without having a solid foundation, which is why the collective focuses the first few modules on building that foundation. My other favorite part is that there is an option to purchase a beautifully, professionally printed and bound workbook that accompanies each lesson. Being able to keep all my notes in one place is amazing and something that will allow me to continue to expand upon as I grow. The other perks of the collective, including live coaching calls, Voxer hours, deep dives, masterclasses, and so many other resources, offer so much additional benefit and options for learning. The Heartful Parent Academy is a positive parenting movement I will be a part of for years to come. That is from member Amanda Wilkes. I'm so grateful for that incredible review. If you have heard of the Academy but not been sure about whether or not you want to join it, give it a try. You can always join us. And if it's not a right fit for you, there's no long-term commitment. So check it out on my website. You can find it at theheartfulparent.com. And I hope to see you there. Cheers, everyone.